18th of September 2025. The day before yesterday, I explained the 4 types of effort categorized according to their functions. Then I spoke about the importance of effort. Part of it, I mentioned how essential effort is to overcome or to fight against the 5th army of Mara, that is Sloth and Torpor. So I will continue this topic. First, let's talk about the characteristics, function, manifestation, and proximate cause of Sloth and Torpor. Sloth is Tina in Pali. Torpor is Midda. These two are different mental faculties. Sloth has the characteristic of an absence of courage. It's a mental inertia, a kind of psychological dullness that causes the mind to become disinterested, reluctant, unmotivated to engage with the meditation object. So an absence of courage is the characteristic of sloth. The function of sloth is to suppress effort. It dominates, overpowers, and obstructs the rising of wholesome energy by making the mind unresponsive and unmotivated. Instead of allowing the mind to engage actively with the meditative object, sloth drags it down, discourages the initiative, and leads to inaction, just like a foggy, just like a fog setting over a landscape. It dims the clarity and sharpness of awareness, making it difficult for the mind to move toward effortful engagement or insight. So the function of the sloth is to suppress effort. The manifestation of sloth is the slacking or sinking of the mind. That means when sloth is present, the mind loses its alertness and becomes sluggish, lethargic, and unresponsive. It tends to sink inward as if collapsing under its own weight, making it difficult to sustain attention on the meditation object. And this inward drooping is not always visible physically, but inwardly the mind withdraws effort and loses interest in the practice. So here yogis must understand that sloth is not always visible physically. It's the mental factor. Even at times manifestation may not be obvious, but the manifestation of the sloth is slacking or sinking of the mind. Is about the mind or mentality, so it may not be that much obvious because sometimes it is not visible physically. And it's about the sloth. Now let's move to the torpor, midda. The torpor has the characteristics of unwieldiness. Unwieldiness means that the mind becomes non-flexible, non-workable, and mentally rigid, while sloth affects the mind itself. Torpor affects the mental factors. Yogis have to remember this fact. I repeat, sloth affects the mind, whereas torpor affects the mental factors. This is the difference between sloth and torpor. Sloth directly affects the mind, and torpor directly affects the co-arising mental factors. So torpor has the characteristic of the unwieldness, or mind become non-flexible, non-workable. That is the characteristics of the torpor. And when the torpor is present, the mental factors cannot perform their functions properly. For example, Vitakka. Vitakka has the function of aiming. We have already discussed about the Vitakka. In the meditation practice, the Vitakka means aiming accurately to the meditative object. But Vitakka, which normally directs the mind to the object, but when sloth, torpor is present, it becomes dull and cannot aim precisely. Now it can't do its function. That is what means like a mental factors become non-workable or non-flexible. Similarly, we know about the viriya, effort. The function of the effort is to propel the mind towards the meditative object. But when the torpor is present, now the effort cannot propel the mind towards the meditative object. So the mind and the mental factors become unworkable, non-flexible. That's why characteristics, the characteristics of the torpor is of unwieldiness. So this is the many characteristics. The function of the torpor is to shroud or to conceal both the mental factors and object, meditative object. It acts like a heavy fog or veil obstructing clarity and awareness. When torpor is present, now the objects become cloudy. Objects become blur, not clear, because the function of the midda is to shroud or to conceal the mind, mental factors, and the objects itself. So this is why when torpor is present, the meditators may feel as if their mind is covered by something heavy or something like a thick. Meditators may feel like that, feel as if their mind is covered by something. You yogis may have the personal experience, making it difficult to see or know the object clearly. This is the function of the torpor. Its manifestation is drooping or sagging, not only of the mind, but often of the body as well. The meditators may experience nodding off, then slumping the posture, or close or heavy eyelids because of drooping. Not only the mental drooping, but bodily drooping as well. So this is the manifestation, and this is very recognizable stage for many meditators, especially during sitting or walking meditation when mindfulness is weak and effort is insufficient. That's why the second manifestation of midda, torpor, is the flickering or fluttering of the eyelids due to mental heaviness, followed by nodding. When torpor becomes stronger, the meditator's eyelids begin to flicker or blink frequently, and the head starts to nod as the mind and body lose their uprightness. So there are two manifestations of the torpor. The first one is drooping the mind and body, and the second manifestation is flickering or fluttering of the eyelids due to the mental heaviness, followed by nodding. So these are the characteristics, function, and the manifestations of sloth and torpor. The proximate cause of both sloth and torpor is unwise attention to states like boredom, laziness, yawning, and even physical stretching physical stretching done out of idleness or out of laziness. Instead of mindfully noting these experiences, the mind indulges in them. Over time, this sloth and torpor, weakening both effort and accurate aiming. So the proximate cause of sloth and torpor is unwise attention. Unwise attention to state like boredom, laziness, yawning, or physical stretching done out of laziness. These two unwholesome mental factors, sloth and torpor, are defined as mental states that suppress the mind and the other mental factors, rendering them incapable of maintaining posture. That means when they arise, even the body becomes difficult to manage as the supportive mental energy weaken. And this is indeed true when sloth and torpor are present. Meditators cannot walk properly if they are walking, cannot stand firmly if they are standing, cannot sit upright if they are sitting. At times, they may even find it difficult to clench the fists or to simply keep the eyes open. You might have personally experienced it becomes difficult to keep the eyes, even to keep the eyes open when sloth and torpor are present. The whole system, mind and body, feels as though it is being pulled downward, heavy, dull, and unwilling to engage in practice. So, in one of the discourses, Buddha compared sloth and torpor with prison, jail. And the comparison is like this. Just as a man who is imprisoned on a festival day. So a man is imprisoned on a festival day. He cannot see the beginning, middle, or the end of the festival. He is locked up during the celebration, so he misses all of it, the joy, the meaning, and the teaching that might be shared during that time. When that man is released the next day and hears other talking about the festival, how joyful it was, how magical it is, he has nothing to say because he did not experience it. Why? Because he was not present, he was not part of it. In the same way, a practitioner overcome by sloth and torpor, even when a Dhamma talk is going on, does not know or understand the beginning, middle, or end of the teaching. After the talk, when others discuss how profound inspiring or beautiful the Dhamma talk was, he had nothing to contribute because he didn't really listen or absorb anything. Similarly, a meditator affected by sloth and torpor does not know or experience the beginning, middle, or the end of the meditation practice. Later, when others share with teachers or friends how good their meditation was, speaking of calmness, joy, rapture, or mental bliss, he or she has nothing to share because the entire session was hindered by sloth and torpor. Even when awake during a Dhamma talk or practice, this person does not respond or engage. Why? Because the sloth and torpor have prevented him from truly experiencing the Dhamma. So this is how the sloth and torpor is compared with the prison. And in this analogy, the prison is sloth and torpor. The festival day is the Dhamma talk or Dhamma practice, meditation. Something joyful, profound, and worth experiencing. And the imprisoned man is like a monk or a meditator or a practitioner who is mentally dull or sleepy during the Dhamma talk or meditation practice. So this simile warns us about mental lethargy, dullness, even if you are physically present during the Dhamma talk or during the practice. If your mind is clouded by dullness, it's like being in prison. You don't benefit, you don't learn, you don't grow. This is how the sloth and torpor hinder in growing. This is how the sloth and torpor halt in our practice, making us imprisoned. And again, sloth and torpor are among the 5 hindrances. And therefore, we must strive to overcome this inner enemy. So now let's talk about how to deal with sloth and torpor. The best approach or strategy is prevention by applying accurate aiming and sufficient effort. You know, prevention is better than cure. So the best approach or the strategy is prevention by applying accurate aiming and sufficient effort continuously and consistently. However, if they do arise for any reason, you should refresh your aiming and renew your effort promptly, instantly, immediately. As soon as you realize that arising of the sloth and torpor, you should refresh your aiming, you should renew your effort immediately. These two effort, and especially aiming factor, that is vitaka, are the antidotes of sloth and torpor. So you may ask why especially aiming? Because sloth and torpor contract the mind while aiming expands it. Sloth and torpor contracts the mind while aiming factor expands it. Sloth and torpor deactivate the mind, aiming activates it. Like at night when many thoughts are running through the mind, it becomes difficult to fall asleep because the mind is so active. In a similar way, aiming energizes and activates the mind. Again, sloth and torpor wither the mind, whereas aiming revives and brightens it, like flower buds opening under the early morning sunlight. So, aiming factor revives, brightens, or blooms the mind and the mental factors. When sloth and torpor is present, mind becomes contracted, mind freezes, mind becomes narrow. But when aiming factor is present, mind becomes, mind blooms, mind becomes expanded. So they are directly opposite to each other. So that is why when you feel sloth and torpor, instantly you have to refresh your mind with accurate aiming, and you have to renew the effort. By application of accurate aiming and sufficient effort, begin observing your primary object or the feeling of sleepiness or drowsiness itself. You may observe the primary object, or you may observe the feelings of sleepiness or drowsiness itself more precisely, more meticulously. This is the first technique for dealing with sloth and torpor, that is by refreshing your aiming and by renewing your effort. If that doesn't work, you can add one or two extra objects alongside the main object. For example, if you are observing the rising and the falling of the abdomen, then you can add the sensation of touch between the two hands as an additional object. Now you have three objects to be observed. Rising of the abdomen, note as rising. Falling of the abdomen, note or label as falling. And touching note as, label as touching. When noting touching, observe the actual sensation at the point of contact, such as pressure, warmth, or tingling, and so on. So continue in a mindful labeling, rising, falling, touching, rising, falling, touching, rising, falling, touching. This helps activate and stabilize the mind, countering the dullness of sloth and torpor with renewed alertness. This is about adding one object. But if you want to add two extra objects, you can add sitting and touching. Sitting and touching. When noting sitting, observe the posture of the body by scanning swiftly. You have to scan swiftly from the bottom to the top, from the base of the body up through the head. You have to do it swiftly, not slowly. You have to do it swiftly. You have to scan, mentally scanning. You have to scan your body swiftly from bottom to the top, and you have to label it as sitting. This helps you to bring full awareness to the seated posture. And for touching, continue observing the point of contact between the two hands. You can still choose the same touching point, focusing on the actual sensation, as I mentioned before, such as pressure, temperature, texture. Now you are working with 4 objects. Rising of the abdomen, label as rising. Falling of the abdomen, label, note as falling. Then sitting. As I have just mentioned, when you label note sitting, now you have to scan your body from bottom to the top swiftly. So label as sitting. Then touching, note as touching, feeling the contact point. Now you have to continue this cycle with mindfulness, rising, falling, sitting, touching. Again, rising, falling, sitting, touching, rising, falling, sitting, touching. So 4 objects to be observed. This cycle of observation keeps the mind alert, engaged, and energized, preventing it from sinking into sloth and torpor. In fact, it is about activating the aiming factor and the effort. The main purpose, the main reason of adding extra objects is to activate the aiming factor and to activate the effort, because they are the antidotes of sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor are getting stronger, so we want to defeat, we want to overcome, and we need antidotes, and they are aiming factor and the effort. Again, if it does not work, alternatively you may choose to completely set aside rising and falling of the abdomen. Instead, you may focus solely the sitting and touching. Sitting and touching as your object, as your meditation object. If you do so, it's better to observe at least two distinct touching points to maintain alertness and prevent the mind from becoming dull. That means if you are just going to note sitting and touching, so minimum it would be better to choose the two touching points. In this case, I recommend observing the contact between the buttocks and the cushion, specifically observing the touching sensation on the right side of the buttocks, and this is your like a first touching point. Then observe the touching sensation on the left side. This is your second touching point. So two touching points to observe. Your observation and labeling should be now follow a clear cycle. Sitting, touching, sitting, touching, sitting, touching. The first touching refers to the right side. Then the second touching refers to the left side. And sitting, I have already mentioned, you have to scan your body from bottom to top. Every time when you note sitting, scan swiftly. You may or may not notice the entire posture. It doesn't mean that you must be able to scan the whole entire body. You don't need to. Yes, you try for that, but you may or may not be capable to do so. Sometimes, at times, you may just notice the only different some part of the body. You may just notice your head, your back, or you may notice only the lower part of the body. So it's fine. You try just to scan from bottom to top when you note sitting. And for touching, first touching refers to the right side of the buttocks. Then the second touching refers to the left side of the buttocks. So continue noting in this rhythm, sitting, touching, sitting, touching, sitting, touching. This is how we can deal with the Sloth and Torpor. So this simple yet effective cycle helps to stabilize attention, energize mindfulness, and counteract dullness and mental heaviness. And if there is a particular sitting session where you often feel sleepy, make sure to do good walking meditation beforehand. I repeat, if you have a particular sitting session where you often feel sleepy, make sure to do good walking meditation beforehand. However, don't only practice the third level of walking, the slowest one. Vary the pace and stay engaged. You have to vary the pace. And then bring the effort, mindfulness, and concentration developed during walking meditation into your sitting practice. This means observing all activities diligently and mindfully. Going to your sitting place, maybe noting, wanting to sit, then sitting down, then making your posture, um, closing your eyes, all these activities you have to observe diligently and mindfully. Then from the very beginning of the sitting session, ensure your mind is active, alert, and awake. Maintain continuous observation and don't allow the mind to become dull or lifeless. From the very beginning of the sitting, you have to take care about that. From the very beginning of the sitting, you have to make sure that your mind is active, alert, awake. And you have to continue the observation and don't allow the mind to become dull. If the mind starts to become dull and for any reason, note it immediately, refresh your mind and boost your effort before the dullness becomes stronger. So immediately you have to refresh your mind, you have to boost your effort immediately before the dullness becomes stronger. So this is how we can deal with the Sloth and Torpor, the fifth army of the Mara, that is Sloth and Torpor. There is a discourse in the text where the Buddha teaches how to deal with sloth and torpor. He gave this instruction to Venerable Mahamoggallana, the second chief disciple of the Buddha, who was nodding off during meditation. Here I will just briefly talk about that discourse, and here is a simple list of 7 techniques the Buddha recommended. Buddha recommended 7 techniques to deal with sloth and torpor. The first one, change one's attitude or perception. That is the first technique. You have to change your attitude. You have to change your perception. This means when sloth and torpor attacks, one may be like tempted to surrender to thoughts like, I am so sleepy, it's not doing me any good, just sit here in a daze. Maybe I will relax for a minute and gather my energy. So as long as you entertain such thoughts, the mental state of sloth and torpor will be encouraged to remain. Instead, you should be determined, committed to overcome sloth and torpor. This is the meaning of changing your attitude. Means you must be determined, you must be committed. You must be committed. And again, change the objects, which I have already mentioned here in this first technique. Changing the attitude and perception means first you have to change your mentality. You should not develop such a mentality that supports the sloth and turtle. That supports the sloth and turtle, you have to be determined to overcome the sloth and turtle. Like anyhow, you will overcome the sloth and turtle. So that kind of mentality is needed. That is how you have to change your attitude. Then another thing is to change the object. And I have already mentioned the second technique Buddha mentioned is to reflect on inspiring passages of Dhamma you have heard or you remember or you have learned by heart, trying to understand their deep meaning so you can contemplate, you can recollect, you can think about the Dhamma. Simply you can think about the Dhamma that you have learned, you have heard, to understand more in deeply. This is the second technique. The third is to recite those passages mentally or verbally. If you are meditating in a group, you should recite only loud enough for your own benefit. So reciting means like you know how to do metta chanting. So you may recite that one if you have memorized by heart. If there are any teachings that you have memorized by heart, then you may recite mentally or verbally. Verbally, I have already mentioned, if you are in group meditation, you should not disturb fellow yogis, so you have to recite only loud enough for your own benefit. This is the third technique. The fourth is, if that does not help, then stimulate the body, like pinch your ears, rub your limbs, face, etc. So this is the fourth. Then the fifth is, next is to get up from your seat, wash your eyes with water, look around in all direction and gaze up at the stars or constellation to refresh the sense. To refresh your sense, now you may wash your eyes, you may look around in all direction, you may gaze up at the stars and constellations. This is the fifth one. The sixth is develop the perception of light. That means to look at a lighted object such as moon or rays of sun or an electric bulb. This should lighten up your mind. This is the sixth. The seventh is, if that doesn't help, then do walking meditation. This is 7. And if after trying all of these methods Sloth and Torpor is still overcome, you then lie down mindfully. So the last one is not the technique, only Buddha mentioned the 7 techniques. The last one is to do walking meditation. Lying down is not included here, but I only mention if after trying all of these methods, Sloth and Torpor still overwhelm you, then lie down mindfully. So these are the 7 techniques mentioned by the Buddha. So at the beginning of the practice, it may take some time to overcome sloth and torpor, but as you apply these techniques and become more skilled, it will take less and less time to deal with them effectively. So at the beginning of practice, it may take time for meditators, but as you try again and again, it will take less and less time to overcome the sloth and torpor. So this is how we have many techniques to overcome the sloth and torpor, and we must try, because sloth and torpor are the impurities of the mind. Not just impurities, but they are the fifth, the army of the Mara. So may you all be able to use these techniques to overcome the sloth and torpor by using these techniques. The best one is prevention. The best one is prevention. So may you be able to prevent the sloth and torpor by continuously, consistently using the 2 mental qualities. They are accurate aiming and sufficient effort. And for any reason, if sloth and torpor arise, note immediately or refresh your mind immediately, renew your effort. If needed, sometimes you have to double your effort. Double your effort and use these techniques. By using these techniques, may you be able to overcome the 5th army of the Mara.